And one of the things I had heard them say, and that's just when I was in college, they said like teens require boundaries. Like you giving them firm boundaries that they bounce off of actually provides them with security. And so it's not a fun process to have them try to test your boundaries and bounce off of them. But you not caving is incredibly helpful for them. And so a lot of times, right, like what are we taught in life? Like be polite, be nice. I didn't get on this call my first time meeting you, Justin, go, Justin, by the way, I will absolutely not do this, this, and this. And you would have been like, what's wrong with this guy, man? Right? Like, I want to be nice. You're my friend's friend. I want to get to know you, But as parents, we can't carry that over when it comes to boundaries. We can't be nice. We got to be parents.
You are listening to the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast, transforming athletes into leaders on and off the court with host Coach Furtado. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast. I'm thrilled today because not only do I have one great guest, I have two great guests, the co-authors of Guiding Your Child's Athletic Journey. It's all about how to maximize and get the most out of youth sports. And so I'm really excited to dive into that. First, we have Kevin Dalafu, entrepreneur, educator, head of school at King's Christian, and a 6-time Coach of the Year in basketball. And joining him is Alex Compton, founder of Valor Pro Global, helping U.S. companies build amazing remote teams, and a former pro basketball player and coach in the Philippines for 22 years. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having us, man.
Of course. So I want to dive right into talking about, before we get into why you wanted to write the book and about, kind of the mission of the book, I'd love to get the backstory on how you both met in the Philippines.
Yeah, so I was actually born in the Philippines. My parents had finished their graduate school work, and my dad's first job was outside of Manila. And then we left when I was 6 months old. So fast forward, I ended up playing high school and then college basketball out east. And when I was at Cornell University, I found out by accident from one of my assistant coaches. So I was a captain. I'm hanging out watching film. And I was like, hey, man, where'd you play overseas? Because I've been around the world a bit. And he mentioned he played in the Philippines. I was like, Philippines? That's where I was born. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. And that led me to going over there. And so I went and I played for 10 years and then ended up coaching for 12 after. But sort of right at the end of my playing careers, I started to get into coaching and starting youth programs, is around the time that Kevin came over. And there's some pretty small circles at a certain level out there. So another guy who was raised in the States as a guard, as a character guy, we met, and then, it was pretty instant hitting it off. He's quickly became a friend.
Yeah, it was just, I went out there as well to go play after my college career and ended up meeting Alex, and we just kind of built a friendship. And then from there, he introduced me to different people that ended up becoming friends. And then our lives have continued to kind of circle back to one another. We have a mutual friend that brought us back together, even though, for the past 10 years, we're saying hi to each other here and there. A friend that he introduced me to is now the one that brought us back together. And it's been a fun time and journey getting to reconnect with Alex as we've done this book together.
Isn't it amazing what the sport of basketball can do to bring you to the Philippines, to connect you with people, and then, that continuous domino cycle of connection that this, little round ball can bring us together. It's fascinating. So with that being said, when you all, decided to, when you first went out from the US to the Philippines, what do you feel like was the biggest thing you learned about yourself when you were young and playing and are like, whoa, this is a completely different culture? And I know, Alex, you were born there, but most of your life had been in the States beforehand.
Yeah, well, one of the things because I lived for 1 year as a kid in Thailand when I was between the ages of 10 and 11, and that was a different culture. So I'm heading back out to Southeast Asia, and I've read up on the Philippines before I went there. But one of the things I thought that I would learn the language of the Philippines, Filipino, or really the main language in the Manila area is called Tagalog. I thought I'd learn Tagalog quickly because I did as a kid in Thailand. And so one of the biggest lessons for me was that I didn't recognize the contextual difference between the two countries. So when I was living in Thailand, there was no Americans around, and nobody spoke English. I mean, there's a few educated people, but I didn't hang out with them. So anybody I was going to see, and my parents are both fluent in Thai, would speak Thai. So that forced me to learn the language quick. When I went to the Philippines, most people in the U.S. aren't aware of this. The medium of instruction in public and private schools is English. So K through 12, so Filipinos are awesome at speaking English, and that gets in the way of you learning a language. So I hit a stumbling block, and I actually quit learning the language at the end of my first year because I was terrible at it. Because everybody would see me and speak English really well to me, and then one of my biggest learnings from that was like, yeah, don't expect to be great at something quickly. It's a different context, and sometimes a different context can make stuff harder. And so then I realized, like, okay, well, it'll take me longer, and I need to be that much more intentional to try to learn a language. And then that process was really good for me and revelatory, and helped me learn things about life. And then after a few years of taking lessons and asking my teammates to speak to me in the local language, then I got pretty good. But it took years instead of months, and that was wonderfully humbling.
I'm sure.
Yeah, for me, so as a kid, I'd go back. I'm half Filipino, so I'd go back and forth, not every 2 or so years. And so I knew about the culture, but what I think I was more surprised at as I was there as a basketball player is just the passion that the Filipinos have for basketball. They just love the game, and everybody plays. You walk into any village, any city, there's covered courts. They all love basketball. They have leagues upon leagues upon leagues. It's just a connector of people, and as Alex said, Filipinos are the nicest people, and so that's fantastic. But then from a basketball perspective, I think what I learned was um, even though the game is the same across the world, the game is different at different countries. The physicality, the speed, even the rules could be the same, but how they're enforced is different. What's a travel here versus there? The type of basketball that they play, and so that was just different for me as I learned that just traveling from playing college basketball to going over there to play. It's a different game even though it's the same game.
Right. And so one of the things that I hear between there is like you were like Alex was learning like the language that Filipinos speak, and then Kevin, you were just learning the language of basketball that they play. And then we're talking about this process. We have this expectation, especially now with social media, that we're going to immediately get great at something. And I feel like to come into your book and to talk about your book, I think one of the things is you both have worked with a ton of athletes, ton of parents, ton of coaches. And on one of the biggest issues is people want to learn and be great right now, but it takes time. So I'd love for you to kind of share how some of that process of learning the language of a different game of basketball, and then obviously just a different language, really helped inspire this book.
Yeah, I mean, so much, in coaching and life and parenting is the emphasis on process. And what was funny for me when I became a head coach of a pro team out there, and I write about this in the book, but there was a specific book that I read. My brother is a trained counseling psychologist and worked as a psychologist and college counselor, college admissions counselor at these international schools. And he went to a psychology conference, and he came back and he said, dude, great book. Got to read this. Mindset, Carol Dweck. And it was right in 2014, as I had taken over as interim coach and then done well enough to be offered the job as a head coach. And so I started reading that, and I fell in love with it, man, because it really was, and it spoke so much to things about my life. I had fixed mindsets, meaning I thought I had fixed character traits in certain areas of my life. And in other areas of my life, I had more of a growth mindset. And, nobody is born like Jordan at his prime, Kobe at his prime, Steph Curry at his prime, right? I mean, we're talking using basketball as an example, but everybody has to learn, grow, and every single person in every single aspect can get better. And if you want to connect that to my language learning process, that was like a sort of a growth mindset shift. Like, because I learned Thai so fast when I was a kid, I thought, oh, it's easy to pick up a language and become
Right.
fluent.
Right.
No, it's actually really not. It's literally a different language. You could say
Yeah.
like it's all Filipino to me, it's all Greek to me, right? Like it's really different. And so understanding that process takes work and diligence. Like some of the best reward I got from that process of learning the language was it literally took me about 2.5 years to become fluent, where in Thailand it took me 6 months. And so even in the same genre, if you will, of language learning, it was a different skill. It was a different thing and it was harder. And I just had to do the work. And when I committed to do the work, then I started growing. And then I got to the point eventually that I wanted to get to. So,
Yeah. And so, when we wrote this book, when we were kind of going through what we're going to title this book, and we landed on that word journey. And I think the journey is so important in anything that you do, the process of that. I tell my boys all the time is you have to embrace the journey before you can enjoy the journey. And so I think embracing it is part of that, and if you fight that, you fight it where, nope, this is too hard, I quit. Well, no matter what, you're on a journey. It doesn't matter in your journey in life. So the more that you embrace that, gives you the ability to enjoy it. And those who enjoy the journey are the ones that truly find the fruit and success at it. And so I think in my basketball, when I first went out there was that struggle, because my struggle was I'm a guy that's going to make the right pass, make the right decision. I'm going to do all the coaching things. And so I went from a 35-second shot clock to a 24-second shot clock. Well, that's a huge difference, right? A good shot at 17 on the clock is different than a good shot at 6 on the clock, right? And losing those 11 seconds was really, and I didn't even know that that was an issue for me until I started reflecting back on it. Like, no, why did you shoot that shot? Well, there is 11 seconds on the clock. I'm feeling that there's 22 on the clock still, right? And so it really took me going, well, hold on, like I can't fight this, right? I can't fight the way that the basketball's played out here. I have to embrace it. And it took a moment of finally going, no, this is the way I'm going to play. And again, embracing that. And then there was joy that came out of that. So I think that's that journey for me.
if I could, Justin, just sharing off that, I think is so important. Like Kevin and I have helped each other in the being dads process through writing this book, right? Like we're the first guys to go like, oh, dude, let me tell you how I just screwed this up. Right? Like there's not a perfect parent. And when he's talking about journey, one of my big mistakes, I know, and I think that Kevin and I have shared some good dialogue on this, is wanting to be at the destination yesterday. Like as a coach, like we got to get to the loose ball right now.
Now.
Like you don't have like a split second, like now. You better be there now. When I blow the whistle, get here now. We don't have time. That constant urgency. And that doesn't translate well to big picture parenting. And so I've made that mistake so many times of bringing that get the possession now mentality into our journey. And I've had to dial it back and go, okay, when in doubt, zoom out. Where are we out here? Where am I? And this whole process of writing this book together with Kevin has really helped me with that, of the embracing, hey, it's a journey, man. Yeah, he's not going to act like a mature 38-year-old when he's 10, like chill. So, yeah.
100%. So I really like this idea and this model around embracing before you can enjoy. And I'm thinking about it specifically because I had been talking to Alex a little bit before, Kevin, about how I have a club basketball program and we just put the teams together in early March and we're getting smoked, right? A lot of our teams are getting smoked. You guys have been doing a lot of losing, right? Which is a part of the journey. Like in order to become a great team, right? You have to go through lumps together. So what chapters or what insight can you give in from the book and your experience on how parents can be guides and help their athletes in the process of taking those lumps before they can really start enjoying the journey?
Well, I think there's a lot. There's a lot, right? Like it'd be so cool if we could have this podcast be about 1 minute and go, hey, here's the answer. It's 5.
Right.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Like that would be awesome.
Right.
And but it's not. So even as we wrote the book, we wrote it around 12 chapters, 12 topics. recognizing that that is not the comprehensive Encyclopedia Britannica of everything that has to do with parenting. It's just things that we thought were really important. One of those for me, and this is connected to something that I've screwed up a lot, and then maybe Kevin, as I'm sharing this, you can bring up a different one so we're not overly redundant. But one of those is this issue of control beliefs. And all that means for people listening is, where do I as an individual look at the control of outcomes of my behavior? Where is that? Is that external? Is it outside? Are they external forces that are making things happen to me? Or am I in control of me? Do I have an internal locus of control? Meaning it's inside. I'm in control of me. And do I make things happen? Do I respond accordingly? And to really kind of narrow that down, I was just meeting with a buddy. I had coffee with a friend who coaches at my son's school this morning. We talked for 2.5 hours about this type of stuff. And for me, I wanted my 8-year-old and my 9-year-old to be responsible, accountable men for their actions. And if you make a mistake, you put your hand up, you say sorry, you make it right. Right? That's me being a little bit too harsh and not having a good idea of where they're at developmentally. And like Kevin mentioned, with the whole notion of journey, it's me trying to understand that control beliefs exist, that the locus of control, where do I place blame, or where do I accept accountability, is a process of shifting a kid along a spectrum from an external, right? Like, oh, it was the refs. Oh, it was this team. Oh, it was this guy. Oh, it was the coach. Oh, it was always somebody else, to then helping them become more and more responsible. But it's a multi-year process of bringing them along. So you emphasize, but you recognize where they're at. And that was all revealed when I would ask my 8 and 9-year-old in our journey from a game, hey, what'd you think of your game? Would you see the refs? No, yeah. How did you play? Well, the guys weren't doing this, or the other team was. The answers were always about other people first, right? And part of what we do as parents and coaches is to help see, okay, well, that happened. What did you do? What can you do better? So that was a big thing for me, and where I really blew it with my 8 and 9-year-old at first until I learned that. So, yeah,
Great. And I would say, just going to your AAU, your travel team there is, I think for parents is, well, how do we define success? And so my first year of coaching, I had taken over a girls basketball team, and they hadn't won a game the year before. And so our goals were different than the team that was in our league that was last year's league champions. And their goal was a section and possibly state championship. And we had to play them twice a year.
Right.
And so the very first time we play them, we barely got the ball past half court. They pressed us the whole game, and they whooped us. And so we played them again about 2.5 weeks later. And so the definition of success for me was different than that coach, right? So going to that game, we worked on a press break. The score at halftime was 20-9, and we broke the press almost every time. We ended up losing the game, right? But let me tell you what the score was the very first time we played them. 80-0. So defining success there, we were very successful because we knew what success was based on the players that I had against the opponent that I had. And I can tell you that coach was not happy because they were not successful based on their standards. And I think that's, as a parent, is defining success and outlining success for your child. Oftentimes you let the stats determine success for our kids. And our stats are the things that matter most. And I would challenge parents that don't let stats be what matter most, because we're going to miss the moments that we need to cherish. I have a travel ball games this weekend. I have, I think, 9 games scheduled with my 2 boys. If we step back, I get to spend time with my children as they are doing something that they love. And I get to be a part of that journey with them. Who cares about the stats, right? But as a dad who's passionate I can really want those stats to be important. I've said before, and when we let our passion become our children's burden, we're in trouble, right? You don't want your passion to be your child's burden. And so this weekend, I'm passionate, but you know what? I can't let the stats be what defines success, right? And when I step back, you know what? I got 9 games where I get to see my children play. Man, that's awesome.
That's a really cool perspective, and I think I might just have to clip that up and send that out to my entire parent community right there. And I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. We have a similar thing where actually our girls had a similar challenge where they couldn't get the ball across half court, and now they're breaking the press every single time. Still don't have a win yet, but just like you're talking about, it's that progress and that improvement, like losing by less. And this goes perfectly with the title of our podcast, Beyond the Scoreboard, right? What are the success metrics beyond the scoreboard? And I think that's so important to keep in mind just as coaches and as parents.
Yeah, well, we started the book. It's funny that you bring that up because we had basically completed the book, except something was missing. And as we talked about it, it was just like we've got to start with values. Like we had discussed before, like where do we put it in? But for a lot of us parents, and I'll always say us because it's not like Kevin and I have 5 PhDs in parenting and we've never dropped the ball, right? Like we're with everybody. like we mess it up sometimes. But a lot of us parents are not clear about our values. And when I say not clear, we have a feeling, we have an emotion, we know right and wrong, we're not bad people, but we haven't really delineated or outlined or said, this is what we stand for. Here, we're going to make these things pillars for us as a family, right? And if we do, and there's clarity around, hey, as a Compton or as a Dalafu or as a Furtado or whoever you are, this is what we stand for. And there's so many that you can choose from, right? Whatever's you. We're not here to tell you what they should be. But we're just saying as a family, as a parent, you get to define that. And then from there, you can approach how you want to treat the games, right? Like, so there might be a lot of overlap, but there might be some really distinct differences. But I found that if you'll define them, if you're married, if you'll define them with your spouse, and if you're not married, that's fine. If you define them with your kids, but so that there's a singular page, it's like that whole coaching thing, right? You can have clear, repeatable points of emphasis. You can always bring it back there. And I think that's a really important place to start because that's a life thing prior to sports and outside of sports. It transcends sports. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, when we started this this journey with us on this book, it just became evident that what you value most should be seen in your goals. And so we do it. We've done a couple of talks, and one of the things I'll do is I'll have people write down what are your goals for your kids. And so they'll write down their goals, and it might be I want a D1 scholarship, I want whatever these might be, and those are fine goals. And then a little bit later on in the talk, I'll say, hey, outline what do you value? What are your values? And then I'll compare them. I'll say, okay, now do your values and your goals, are there any contradiction there? And then I would ask them, if you had to get one of these goals that had to sacrifice one of these values, are you okay with that? Because if that's the case, then you need to reevaluate your goals. And if it's not okay, or you notice that these goals over here are going to mess with your values, comprise your values, then you really need to reevaluate your goals. And in the book, we talk about values, and your values form your standards, and your standards then what you expect, and then from there you have your goals. And so that's all outlined in there. But really, you have your values, and what do you value most? It should be reflected in what your goals are. And an example of that would be I value sportsmanship, right? And so one of the expectations that we have on our team is that any time that we knock a player down, we help them up. It doesn't matter what it is. And that's our expectation. So our goal would be our whole season, we don't miss one time where we knock somebody down. And we help them. Now, different coaches have different philosophies on that. That's fine. But for me, I value sportsmanship. And so the expectation is anytime we go, we foul a kid, he falls down, we pick him back up. And we that's just our expectations for that. And so that's I think it's important. So now if my goals didn't reflect my values, again, you got to reevaluate what your values are.
100%. And I really like that because that's a great opportunity for coaches and parents that are listening to really reflect on, are my decisions as a parent or as a coach embody the values that I say? And like a lot of times, like Alex, you were referring to, like we have an idea of what our values are, but they're not super clear. They're not clarified. So like with BTG, one of our values is joy in the gym. It's actually our number one value. So I guess with joy in the gym, it would be a goal would be like at the end of the season would be how much fun did our athletes have during our season? Not how many games they won, but because that's our number one goal, right? Or number one value, our goals should reflect that. And I think that's something that we just forget about as coaches and as parents and as human beings.
Yeah, and none of that's ever, if there's we call it a values gap. We didn't, invent that phrase, but if there's a gap in your values, what you say and what you're living out, you actually value, it's just what we call a diagnostic, right? And what that means is it's just, okay, so this is where you're at. All right. It's not working because you're saying it's joy, but what you want is really number one is discipline. And the kids see that. You smile once a week in practice. So if joy's not really, if that's how you're living it, that's fine. If discipline's number one, that's fine. It's a great trait, right? But don't say that it's joy. And okay, maybe you need to reevaluate and go back and then just adjust it. You know what, guys? We really want to emphasize this more. And that's okay. I mean, I know like I've told my kids since they started playing youth sports. So I got 3 kids. I got 2 boys and a girl. One's 13, one's 11, one's 9. Since they started playing youth sports, and I hadn't heard this somewhere. I just kind of, and it's not, I'm sure it's not original or overwhelming, but I'm like, guys, 4 things you got to do this practice, every practice and every game. Have fun, play hard, be a good teammate, and listen to your coach. If you check those 4 boxes, it's a great practice, even if you went 0 for 100, even if you struck out every time, because you're trying your best, you're having fun, you're being a good teammate, you're listening to your coach, right? Like sometimes, man, and I would tell them I was a pro guard who could shoot the ball. Sometimes I couldn't throw it in the ocean. But if I was doing everything I could and I don't know why it's off, I'm trying my best. I'm not a bad person, right? Like I've still put it out there. I'm just bad today. And sometimes you're just bad. That's okay. But do those 4 things, man. You're good.
Yeah, and I think as a parent, values don't always align with our children's values don't always align with our values. And I think it's parenting, right? And so, for example, we value hard work. And so, and my kid, I think he values hard work too. My expectation isn't always his expectation. So one of those expectations is that hard work in the classroom is just as important as hard work in the gym. My son doesn't have that same expectation, right? And I think a lot of people probably have this similar, especially when they have a child who's athletically inclined and they're pushing. That child wants to put so much effort into their athletics, which tend to see, well, I'm going to be a pro basketball player. I'm going to be a pro tennis player. I'm going to be a pro golfer. I don't need education. And us as parents, we obviously see that differently. And so then there's creates a values gap. One story I share in the book about my son is um, he's in 8th grade and he's slowly getting more autonomy over his own education. And so really what does that mean is we're not checking, did you do your math homework today? Did you do this? Did you do that? And so he is supposed to come to us when he needs help. And so we have this. It's a Friday night, and I'm like, "Hey, bud, what are you gonna do this weekend?" He said, "Well, Dad, I'm gonna do this, this, and this, and this was 2 basketball workouts and 1 weightlifting workout on Saturday, and then 1 weightlifting workout on Sunday and 1 basketball workout." And so he plans all of these. I have one brother who does his weightlifting workout. I have another brother who does his basketball workouts. So he plans all these out for the weekend. Great. Hey, good job. He comes in from doing one of his last workout on Sunday nights, about 8:30 at night, And he goes to his mom and he says, "Hey, mom, I need help with my homework." My wife looks at him and kind of like, "Oh, what do you need?" He has 5 tests to study for in the next 2 days. Yeah, my wife was not very happy. And so she went off on him. And so she called me and she's like, "Kevin, you need to deal with your son." Suddenly he's my son, right? And so I go, I walk past him and I say something, "Hey man, what's going on?" And he's like, um, "Well, I don't know why mom's upset." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, I'm gonna get an A in the class anyways." He's a good student. He's like, "Why is she so mad? I'm gonna get an A in the class anyways, even if I get a C on the test or whatever." Like he was just kind of snappy with me. And I go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, son, you're missing the point. In our family, we work hard in everything we do. It doesn't matter if it's academics or athletics. We value hard work, and anything you put your name behind, you're going to work your tail off. And what you also are missing, son, is we do academics first and athletics follow." And so that's the value that we're passing on to him. There's a gap there. We had to remind him of that gap. And and so he has been better the rest of the school year in now, do I think his values have changed? Probably not. But he's meeting our family's expectations now. So
My one question for that would be like, how do you get buy-in? Or like, I'm sure some coaches or parents are wondering, how do I get buy-in from because actually this is something I've had multiple parents come up and talk to me about. It's like, my kid loves basketball. He'll go to every one of your workouts, coach, but he doesn't want to study until 11 o'clock at night before the test, or you're going to do the essay. And what you talked about the values aspect, but how do you get them to kind of buy into those family values or buy into your team values?
Well, Kevin might have a specific response to that in terms of his story. I think it's just the same way that you give them consequences for their actions, right? I mean, like the beautiful thing, like probably the people listening to this are very similar to us. Love sports, got their kids in sports. They're in it. They're engaged, right? The beautiful thing about getting into youth sports is that kids are passionate about it, right? Like, do you guys remember being really passionate about math in 6th grade? I don't. I don't remember being passionate. My parents are educators. They both have their PhDs. I didn't care about social studies. It was a thing I had to do. Now, I'm not saying that that's right. I'm just saying it was. And I think a lot of kids are that way. But so what sports can teach you is this thing that you really like doing. That's awesome. Guess what? You don't get to do whatever you want whenever you want without any kind of standards in place. So in order to do this, you have to do that. And that's cool. Like, I'm glad you love this. This part's not a negotiable. So I've had times where my son, he's got practice at 5, school's out at 3:30. I found out he didn't turn his homework in time. I called the coach. "Hey man, sorry. Yeah, Owen can't make it." Oh shoot, I don't want to say my son's first name, but anyways, it's good. He can't make it. He can't make it because he didn't finish his homework. And he's like, "That's cool." He's like, "Is there any way you can get it done?" Well, we'll see. But he was coming home right away to finish that homework. If he got it done the right way, and his mom's a teacher, and she checked it, then he could go to practice. But it was not a question that he wasn't going unless it was done right. And it wasn't because there was great joy for him in doing the
Right.
homework, right? It was like, hey man, so that's kind of how we approach it.
I would say as a parent that make sure you live out your consequences. So if you say, "Hey, Coach Justin expects you at practice today. They're working on their press break, but you can't go until you do your homework." Make sure they do their homework, because once you kind of flex on that, because now they know that, oh well, I can do 70% of my homework. She's still gonna let me go, or my dad's gonna. So I would just live through that consequence. Make sure you live it out. And I'll give you like the other one is, as a parent, find the carrot, right? Which sounds like athletics is probably going to be the carrot. And so when I was in high school, I entered high school, my dad said, "Hey, you need a 3.0 to play basketball, 3.5 to drive." So as a freshman, right? So I get a 3.5. I get my keys as a sophomore. I'm like, "Hey, Dad, got my keys." And he goes, "Hey, I got my 3.5. I can drive. Hey, can I take this girl out on a date?" And my dad's like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Well, Kev, if you start dating, girls take a lot of time." He says, "Why don't we do this? He goes, you don't want to get a girlfriend and then your grades drop below a 3.5 and now you don't have a car and she's going to break up with you with that. And it's going to be heartbreaking. So son, why don't you do this? Why don't you get up to a 3.7? Get to a 3.7. That way you know that you can have a 3.7. You get a girlfriend. Your grades are going to drop a little bit, but at least you'll still have your car. I'm like, Dad, you're so smart. Thanks for looking out for me, man. So what do? Get my 3.7. Come running up to my dad. Hey, Dad. Hey, I got a 3.7. Can I, go on a date? He's like, oh yeah, that's great, man. That's really good job. And then he's like, girls are expensive. And I'm like, he's like, oh yeah, Dad. And he's like, well, how are you going to pay for this? I said, well, I thought maybe Dad, you could help me out. And he's like, you know what? Yeah, I'll help you out. Why don't you start mowing the lawn? And because we had a gardener at the time, so he, this is how much I pay him. I'll start paying you that. Okay, Dad, thanks. He goes, but it's going to take more time on the weekend. So why don't we get you up to a 3.8 so that you can know that you're going to lose more time, but you can at least make sure that and you can see kind of the trend that he's having here, right? So, you know what I did? Went back to a 3.5, kept my car, and forgot about girls. And so that right there is like my dad, he knew what my carrots were and what I would hit those carrots. But I didn't value the girl more than I did my time and also playing basketball. And so I think as a parent, finding the carrot for your kid and what's going to move them and motivate them, and then have them, and then if they don't hit the carrot, you don't give them whatever it is or whatever that goal is. So again, being consistent with your consequences.
Yeah, that's the big thing I hear from everything from here is just like when we're holding our athletes, our kids accountable, we want to be consistent and we want to follow through. And I think that's one thing that if we're not following through, then they're just going to kind of, for lack of a better word, just like skate through everything. Right. And we don't want to let them, we have that opportunity as coaches and as parents, as athlete influencers to set that standard and then follow through on that standard. And it's not about them liking us in the time. It's about them liking us in 10 years because we help prepare them for life beyond basketball, baseball, whatever sport it is.
Yeah, it was really interesting, Justin. Both my brothers, one's a counseling psychologist, one's in business now. But they had worked at it's like a juvie detention facility, kind of the last step before juvie jail. So they had studied a lot. And one of the things I had heard them say, and that's just when I was in college, they said like teens require boundaries. Like you giving them firm boundaries that they bounce off of actually provides them with security. And so it's not a fun process to have them try to test your boundaries and bounce off of them. But you not caving is incredibly helpful for them. And so a lot of times, right, like what are we taught in life? Like be polite, be nice. I didn't get on this call my first time meeting you, Justin, go, Justin, by the way, I will absolutely not do this, 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 and this. And you would have been like, what's wrong with this guy, man? Right? Like I want to be nice. You're my friend's friend. I want to get to know you, like, but as parents, we can't carry that over when it comes to boundaries. We can't be nice. We got to be parents. And if they're crossing a clearly delineated line, and it should be clear, and you've said this is going to be the consequence, you actually help them. And it might not feel like it, but by following through and being consistent and giving them that boundary, you help them with their security. I would just always, that stuck with me, man. I was in my early 20s when I heard that. I'm like, really? Teens need boundaries? I hated boundaries as a teenager.
I'm going to steal that one too, for sure. I like that a lot.
And Justin, you know this as a coach, that the best coaches are the ones who hold their players accountable. And so as a parent, you're actually preparing them for the basketball court, right? When you're holding them accountable and knowing that you can't talk your way out of something or, do something halfway, that then they're going to be able to continue doing what they want. The same thing on the basketball court, right? So the best coaches, you yourself, a kid doesn't touch the line when you're running a set of lines. What do? You got to do it again, right? You miss a layup and you jog back on defense. What happens? You can sit next to me, right? The consequences are the same. So as a parent, when you have these boundaries, you're actually preparing them not only for the basketball court, but what? real life. Because guess what? You show up to work and you're late to work. Well, eventually you might lose your job, right? There's consequences for those. So yeah, we want to be our friends, our kids' friends, and those type of things. But what we're doing in home is preparing them to be successful in the basketball court or the tennis court or the golf course or whatever it might be, which is then preparing them to be successful in life. And so that's what I would encourage parents is like, honestly, you think you're helping them by not holding them accountable at home. Well, it's actually going to hurt them because now they're used to not being held accountable when the coach is going to try.
And if I could just share with this off that, like, I'm a really happy-go-lucky kind of positive person in life, right? So not everybody's wired that way. It doesn't make me any better than anybody else. It's just kind of my natural personality, right? And Kevin would actually be more of the head coach, stern, still fun to be around, great sense of humor and all that, but like I'll be more, hey, out there, right? So we're all different. But when you enforce boundaries, you don't have to be Bobby Knight. You don't have to be some screaming nuts coach. You don't have to be, it's like, this is what we talked about. This is what you did. Here's what's happening now. Right. And that boundaries kind of mixing those with warmth and love is really what authoritative parenting does. If anybody ever looked into that or wants to talk about that, it's the best place you want to be. Like, I love you, son. Do that again. And the consequences will be worse than they are right now. For right now, here's what's going to happen. I love you too much. I like literally just said this to one of my kids in the kitchen yesterday. I love you too much to let that remain. So here's what's going to happen. Right? I don't have to be screaming jerk, which I think we all have it in us to be able to be at points. But but I know that some really nice parents who I've met are afraid to enforce the boundaries because they think they got to be a yelling drill sergeant. No, you don't.
And I really like that you just said, like, I love you and I have to hold you accountable because I love you, right? So, and it's a similar thing when I correct like a lot of my athletes' behavior or just coaching them. It's like, I'm coaching you hard because I believe in you and you have potential, right? So they understand, and it's, they understand the why behind it. Kevin, you were going to add something?
One of my favorite coaching moments, it's really happened the past few years. I think because I've established a culture with my team, we hold each other accountable really well. The players do it themselves. I had this moment with this past year where we're just not playing good. We're playing selfish basketball. Shots are flying. And so I think, a few years ago, I probably would have called a timeout, ripped them, right? I just called a timeout, brought them in. I said, hey, guys, this is how this is going to play out. Either you guys are going to win the way that we win, but I am too good of a coach to let you guys act this way or play this way. And so we're either winning with you guys or these guys over here. And so it's up to you. Broke the huddle. That's all. That's all it needed, right? It didn't need this fiery speech. I didn't have to call out their manhood or anything like that. Just say, hey, you're outside the standard. And I'm going to hold you accountable. And one of the best teachers is the bench. And
Yes.
so, but we can leave it here or you can do the bench because I got 5 other guys that are very happy to go play. And so, shaped up, we ended up winning by quite a few points. And now, to be fair, that's not always how you can coach, right? But in that moment with that team, they knew that I was going to hold them accountable. But I didn't have to do it with yelling and screaming. It was just a quick 15-second conversation. They were back on the court and things changed.
And I love it because you gave them a choice, right? You could be here or you can reach our standards. Not like you just said, you're out of here, right? And I think that's something that's really powerful is giving, because they know, right? They know that they weren't living up to the standard. And you presented that opportunity. Well, you can sit next to me, right? It's nice and warm over here, and there's some other guys that want to get in. So I think that's really powerful. My last question, and then I'd love for you to share, both of you to share a little bit more about where people can find the book is, you talked about the bench, and the bench is a learning tool. And I think one of the things we talked about before we got on the call was, or our show is, you can get a lot out of youth sports, whether you are a starter and going Division I or you're number 12 and you're the last on the bench.
Oh, super. In fact, it's interesting. We have a chapter on leadership. A lot of, and if you watch, Michael Jordan hasn't coached. Magic coached a little. I don't think it went that well. And I have a friend who played in the NBA against him, and he said Magic's by far the best leader he's ever been around. So, Bird coached for 3 years, but he had some really good assistants around him very intentionally. And he said 3 years and I'm done. So a lot of the best guys don't become the best coaches. A lot of the most talented people don't become the best leaders. And you can learn so much about life and leadership from the bench, being an off the bench guy. So that's why our book is really for everybody, because youth sports has such value for every participant, right? And man, there is so many examples of people who've become very high level leaders. Who was 12th man on this team? Who was 10th? She was 8th on this team. But they watched and they learned and they observed human behavior and they saw things. One of my close friends is the superintendent of the Ontario Montclair School District out in California. And he's actually in that leadership chapter in the book. And he said he noticed in youth sports that he watched and he saw how people treated him when he was in 7th grade. And he realized what he did like, what he didn't like. And he filed those away and he kept a mental bank account, not like to get back at anybody, but just to go, I didn't like that. I don't like being treated that way. Or I did like that. I like treating people that way. And he's, honest to goodness, he's one of the best leaders I've ever been around. And when I'm in that school district, I hear the way that people talk about him when he's not around. And there's a real respect and reverence for him. And he said he learned a lot of those things through youth sports. A lot of the times he was not close to being the star. And so I think that's just an encouragement for people to get involved and to talk them through your kids. To go back to what Kevin shared earlier, how do you define success? Like, I played baseball. I wasn't very good. I played soccer for a little bit. I wasn't very good. Does that make me like some sort of bad guy? Was that a failure? Was that a waste of time? Or did I actually learn things that helped me in life? And I can tell you I learned things. And so if we have as parents these intentional conversations with our kid, like, hey, bud, sure, I get that you're frustrated. You play basketball, you're the 9th man on a team of 11. Okay. So what do you think you can do about it? Right? What do you see? What are you learning right now? How can you be about those type of questions are incredibly helpful to the kid and can turn what could be a negative experience into a long-term radically positive one.
Yeah, I think as a parent, defining, I guess, that big picture success, and it's some version of this. We want to raise a fully functional adult who is an asset to society and those around him. And so that's what youth sports can do, right? It teaches hard work. It teaches discipline. It teaches sacrifice. It teaches all these things that if students or athletes learn these things, when they leave, no matter if they're the 12th man or the number 1 guy, those things are going to help them become fully functional adults who are assets to society and the people around them. And so I think that's when we wrote this book, that was it. It's like, hey, your kid might not be the superstar, but man, they can learn so much about sports, and here's something to guide them as they're going through that journey.
100%. And just as testament for what you guys are talking about, I was one of the last guys on my bench on my varsity team. And right now I'm the only one that's in basketball right now, living my dreams as a basketball director. So in a lot of my experience, right? And we need to maybe do a podcast episode number 2 as we're kind of running out on time, but a lot of life lessons and skills I learned was from the bench. So I love this conversation. Where can those that are listening, follow you guys, and then where can they, purchase the book?
Yeah, the book's called Guiding Your Child. Well, it's Wisest Learners, Guiding Your Child's Athletic Journey. It's on Amazon. You just type those words in and you can order it there. And it's available on Kindle as well. And we should have the audio book coming out in a few weeks. We're targeting May 15th. So Kevin and I got to pretend that we were a recording artist in a studio with the headset on, acting like we're singing. It was kind of fun. So we actually did the reading for that ourselves.
That's awesome.
You also find us. We're both on LinkedIn. We're also both on Instagram. And so I'm just my first and last name, Kevin Dalafu. Alex, you want to tell me yours?
Yeah, mine's Alex Compton USPH, and it's USPH because an American who loves the Philippines.
I love it. Thank you both so much for your time today. I have a couple of pages of notes. I got some great things for myself. I know you dropped a lot of good nuggets for parents as well and other coaches. So really appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend, coach, or parent you feel like would get value from this episode. It's our responsibility to impact as many parents and coaches who are the ones that are impacting our athletes. That's how we create a ripple effect. So thank you for being a part of our community, and we look forward to serving you all next week.